All right, we're in it. I'm like trying to watch myself on a screen on the other screen, which is a little strange. Welcome everyone. I'm harden-hardys Chase, CEO of Vaporware, new Urbit startup. Over the last few months, as I've been sort of like talking to investors and people outside of the Urbit community, I've often been asked the question why we chose the name Vaporware. It always seemed reasonable to me that if Urbit itself is vaporware, any software written for the system would also just sort of inherit that property. Sarliv Sarsen, who is also on our team, frequently reminds me that sort of the best kind of marketing is truthful in a sort of foundational way. So I thought, why not put that disclaimer up front where any casual Hacker News passerby would immediately be warned off. My talk's going to be a little bit different than some of the others you've heard this week. On the back half of it, I'm going to walk you through some demos of a few of our earliest experiments. We'll take a look at Mask, which is an agent for signing into Urbit with MetaMask, and then we'll look at Tharsis as well. And this will be the first preview of that. It's the network's first turn-based extensible war game. Given Urbit's ambitions, we thought, better start practicing early. Before we get to the demos, I want to frame some of the work that we're doing at Vaporware. I think sort of a critical part of my job is to try and provide a coherent ontology to the project that we're working on. So what is the nature of the systems that we're building? To what end are we building them? Are there lessons that we can draw from adjacent areas to make our jobs easier or our technology more powerful? So our goal at Vaporware is to monetize Urbit applications, and to do so in such a way that our small community will be able to outcompete the world's most well-capitalized corporations. This is like a very challenging systems design problem, in part because we can't simply copy and paste the existing strategies from those competitors. Urbit has sort of a unique set of properties as a computer that means some of those business models are just completely closed to us. But more than that, it's our view that we don't have the time actually to develop organizations with the necessary competencies to battle these guys out on a one-to-one basis. We're just not going to be able to beat Facebook at their own game. So instead, we need to sort of like reflect on the natural advantages of Urbit as a target for software development and make a new game where incumbents have a natural disadvantage and we can flex our natural advantages. And we need to provide these affordances without undermining the economic incentives required for small teams and investors to gamble time and capital into some uncertain product ideas. The core bet of the company is basically that if we can do this, we think that if we can sort of like be maximally successful in this goal, then the corporation as a coordinating structure for the creation of software should largely cease to exist. This is desirable because the last 20 years have made clear many deficiencies in centralized hierarchical control of computing infrastructure. And we think that these new systems will offer a better way of developing software and the services surrounding it. So I'm going to walk you through what we think this system could look like and how we're starting to experiment with smaller pieces of it to learn more about what a full productized version could be. It's always wise to steal an idea rather than invent it yourself, if at all possible. And if we're going to steal, I figured, let's steal from one of the most impressive successes from one of the most competent technology executives of our time. And so this is Eric Schmidt, obviously. I'm not talking about Google, though, but an earlier project, actually, that Eric Schmidt took to Google and used as his playbook there, and then that was sort of more widely adopted by Silicon Valley in the 90s and early 2000s. That project was Java, actually. Java is a fascinating rabbit hole that anyone working on Urbit should set aside aside some time to study. But I want to draw attention to a particularly surprising part of its story. To a very large degree, Java was adopted because Sun Microsystems poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the marketing of this language. This is not the way that most programming languages are adopted, just to call that out. And what gave Sun's CTO, Eric Schmidt, at the time, sort of confidence to make this bet was a understanding of, at the time, a very obscure economic theory proposed by Stanford economist Brian Arthur. Arthur called his theory increasing returns, the dynamics of choice under increasing returns, released it in 1983. Today's language, we don't use increasing returns anymore. Now we call them network effects. So this is the tendency for certain types of technologies to experience strong feedback loops during adoption. So those that get ahead initially tend to get further ahead and can quickly become locked in. Eric and the other executives at Sun realized that the battle for language and vendor dominance in the newly emerging internet was subject to increasing returns. On this basis, they ran one of, if not perhaps the most aggressive adoption campaigns for any programming language that we've seen thus far. I think the lesson to draw from Java is not that Hoon needs $1 billion marketing budget, though that would be nice, but that as a project, Urbit needs to understand the dynamics of the markets we're attempting to disrupt. If we can marry sort of the superior technology that we already have with a superior understanding of the business environment and the strategy based on our understanding of the market dynamics at play, I think we might actually have a very good shot at disrupting these large companies. But as I said, network effects are sort of a known thing now. The incumbents we're battling are the best in the world at this game. So we need some further insight that expands the game board in a way that they aren't suspecting. To steal a metaphor from Neil Davis, we need to channel our inner coyote. The software industry of today was developed on the back of Arthur's writings from the 1980s, this paper in particular. In 2009, he published a new work that he called The Nature of Technology. So this was the post-internet. Most of these large companies had already rolled out and people were talking about it. The Nature of Technology puts forward sort of a general evolutionary theory of technology. So similar to what has occurred in biology, Arthur has attempted to use these tools and apply them to technology as a system in itself. These insights emerge from a growing area of science called complexity theory, which takes as its object of study complex adaptive systems. A couple examples of those would be natural organisms, biological organisms, but also things like market economies and cultures. This framework is most mature in the biological sciences and climate sciences, but it's growing quite quickly. It's a wholesale rejection of the Enlightenment era sort of material reductionism, this idea that everything can be reduced down to simple rules and that those describe the system in its entirety. And I think that it's very likely to constitute the basis for a new revolution in science. Complex systems have properties that basically arise from relationships between their subcomponents and their external environment. Those properties are things like nonlinearity, emergence, spontaneous order, adaptation, and feedback loops, both positive and negative. We think that basically applying this framework of analysis to technology itself is Brian Arthur's greatest intellectual contribution to Western culture. And like Eric Schmidt before us, we think we can leverage Arthur's analysis here to design and play a better game than what our competitors are playing. So Arthur identified 3 descriptive properties of technology as a complex adaptive system, which explain how new technologies emerge and grow in complexity and power over time. These three properties are a recursive tree structure of components and subcomponents that nest all the way down to some fundamental base layer. They all have an ability to be combined and recombined with other technologies to form more complex technical organisms. And then each technology, in a very intentional way, captures some naturally occurring phenomena and makes that phenomena essentially available for programming with a specific ends in mind. During the Industrial Revolution, new technologies were almost always fixed in design and basically set to a single purpose. The open hearth process for steel making, the cracking process for refining crude oil. They did one thing in a factory designed for that process. They were, as technologies, purely a means of production. Software is not like this at all. The technology that we construct today is less like a factory from the 20th century and much more like a digital chemistry whose chief strength is its ability to be combined and recombined endlessly, to be ported from one context into another context. To quote Arthur, modularity is to a technological economy what the division of labor is to a manufacturing one. The framing is wonderful here, actually, because it helps us understand both the beauty and success of current technology companies in addition to some of their weaknesses. My claim, which is slightly different than the claim made more popularly, is that the key innovation of FANG and these other SaaS companies that we interact with on a daily basis today is not just the software that they're selling to users or advertisers, but that they recognized a new natural phenomenon in the world, this increasing returns, network effects that Arthur wrote about, and were able to design a technology to capture it. This is what Eric Schmidt and Son did with Java, is they built a mechanism, a machine, a corporate organism that was capable of recognizing and utilizing this natural phenomenon. So this is not just about software. These companies had to combine software, policy, distribution channels, culture, storytelling, and an untold number of other sort of like subcomponents to build the machines that we see today. I've spent, actually quite a bit of time working with people from these companies. And I think the most remarkable thing that I witnessed was the complete professionalization of these techniques. Locating these untapped opportunities for increasing returns for network effects, engineering systems to strengthen and reinforce adoption using these effects that Arthur wrote about, and then optimizing that machine once it's running is basically as solved an engineering problem at this point as is bridge building. The industry has created a remarkable pipeline for educating, onboarding, and training new contributors. And the techniques that they've pioneered, first at these large sort of social networking sites, but then more broadly into SaaS, like all technology, these techniques are built from smaller subcomponents and have been recombined and can be recombined to fit the characteristics of the market in which they are being used. In my case, I saw these things being applied to a used car market, very different than Facebook as a business. But the tools that we were using, the technology that we were using to grow that company, that market, were identical to the things that Facebook pioneered. So I think that this is important to recognize because in many ways it's a beautiful story of sort of the ingenuity of humans recognizing a new phenomenon and designing a very complex technology to capture it. And I think it's also important because by recognizing this, we can also understand where some of their weaknesses as companies and projects might lie. So Arthur's work can broadly be divided into two categories. The first we've talked about with respect to traditional Web 2 style companies. It describes the dynamics of technology adoption. That's increasing returns and network effects. The nature of technology, Arthur's second major work, describes the dynamics of technology creation. That's the nature of technology and his general evolutionary theory. By focusing sort of so single-mindedly on technologies which capture and make programmable the phenomenon of network effects, we think that incumbents have basically missed what we hope is now just like an obvious conclusion, which is that the dynamics of technology creation itself, the way that technology comes about and evolves and is recombined, is itself a natural phenomenon and can be captured and programmed like other natural phenomenon, in the same way that we use technology to capture the increasing returns of digital networks, or the sort of the nature of steel when or iron when combined with steel. Our bet basically is that since the act of creation is upstream of adoption, that if a community can sort of pull this off, that is designing technology that can be used to experiment with ecosystem level coordination mechanisms for the creation of new technology itself, new software in our case, then that community will have a massive advantage over incumbent industries that are only expert in the dynamics of adoption of network effects. And our bet is that this is a stronger effect than just adoption, and Urbit is the system that can allow us to develop many of these things. So I want to come back just to the goal that we started with. We have a goal at Vaporware of trying to monetize Urbit applications, and we want to do this in such a way that our small community will be able to outcompete the world's most well-capitalized corporations. I've talked a little bit about the background that we're pulling from to come up with this strategy. The approach that we think we should take is to build a kind of meta technology that allows for the direct and intentional experimentation with coordinating mechanisms around software development. And we think there are some important properties to get right here. First, we think that these mechanisms need to provide sort of a set of tools for monetizing Urbit apps and data stored on Urbit nodes that reinforces the permissionless building that we all know and appreciate of the platform, while maintaining sort of the core financial incentives that builders need to come in and build these applications and these tools in the first place. We think that these mechanisms also need to concretize free and open source software development and make that the default for user space application development and the way that we think about growing the value of our network and our community. Finally, we think that it's not going to be just up to us to come up with a method of doing this. And that's not really the point of this like meta tool anyway. And so what we need to do is, in addition to these first two properties, we need to create a system of tools, a system of tools for individual ecosystems using Urbit, such that they can self-regulate software development and distribution practices based on their own hypotheses about what will or will not be a competitive model. And so this builds out basically a market for competing ideas about what a robust, productive software ecosystem should look like. And it lets these compete against one another directly. This is like a very challenging project. And we've actually come to the conclusion that in some ways, actually, the monetization mechanisms are like the most obvious. So that's where we're starting first. And that's where most of our early experiments have been focused on. So our first experiments are basically using Ethereum NFTs as a accounting and file permission system. The first version of this looks relatively simple. We're using NFTs to basically gate access to desk distribution on Urbit. So by purchasing an NFT, a software distributorship will allow users to download that software. And if you don't own that token, then you won't be able to get that software, at least from that distributor. Piracy is another question that we can dig into in maybe the Q&A. We have some thoughts around that. We think NFTs are basically like a good first approximation of the kind of primitive that we need for monetization. because end users can resell them. And so there's this idea of a secondary market for software that you own. The markets are global and very well capitalized already. And because they're global on blockchains, they retain many of the permissionless properties that we value in Urbit. And so we think there's a good fit there. And it's a relatively easy integration because of some of the existing tooling that already exists inside of Urbit. And we see a clear path to using things like Zorp and Uqbar to make this product better and these tools sort of simpler and easier to use. So we're going to switch over now to demoing some of the software. I'm first going to show you a small tool that we've made to ease the onboarding process. We call this Mask. Let me pop this open and we can take a look at it. The core idea here is to meet the Web3 community where they're coming from. So if you look at most Web3 users today, they're very comfortable with the general flow of logging in via a wallet. And since Urbit IDs are NFTs already, we want to support that flow for them. So this is a MetaMask sign-in page running on the Mask agent that is hosted on my ship. This is a self-hosted login page. What this allows you to do is come to this page. In this case, I'm about to demo our other piece of software that we're calling Tharsis. And so we're aware of this and will redirect me automatically. By signing a challenge message, we're able to authenticate that the wallet owner is actually the owner of the Urbit ID, and then we set cookies and log you in. This supports obviously sort of redirecting to a particular app, so you can land in landscape if you want, or in our case, we're looking at using this as a way to onboard people that aren't yet using Urbit. So I'll go ahead and log in here. My MetaMask modal is popping up. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that. I'll sign the challenge request. And now we're loading Tharsis. So let me talk a little bit about the idea behind Tharsis. Tharsis is the first Urbit native PvP game that is not just a rehash of other games. Obviously, there are things like Go, chess, poker, some others now. We wanted to develop a game that we thought would demonstrate some of the unique affordances that Urbit already has. The game itself features sort of two versions, each which will be purchasable by through the NFT mechanism that we've discussed. The first is just a player client that allows you to find games, join games, and play with other players. The second token is a game server. So because there is some secret information in this game, we do need a trusted centralized node to basically keep track of that information and route the appropriate information to the other players. And so we're taking basically a line from group script, the group's technique here, and we're federating this app. So if you want to run a game server, you can buy a game server token, and you can be a host for Tharsis games with you and your friends. We're looking at integrating some additional NFT mechanisms into it. So being a game server may actually have some financial rewards baked into it at a later point. Tharsis is inspired predominantly by a prototype board game called Tank Turn Tactics, which is famous for having almost caused the destruction of the game studio that invented it. It became sort of so addictive that the studio ground to a halt, and they had to ban the game. We thought, obviously we should recreate this for the Urbit community. The core mechanic is that you want to be the last player left alive. If you are the last player left alive, you receive the glory and maybe in the future some financial incentive as well. The core game economy features a single currency effectively that we call action points. Action points let you move around the board they let you shoot other players, and they're also fungible. So you can trade them to other players on the board to form alliances, to daisy chain points to one player and set up wombo combos. And they're basically there as an incentive mechanism to encourage PvP combat and diplomacy style negotiation. When you die, we assign you to the jury. And like the jury in Survivor, you have a job to do. Your job is to vote for a player each round, and the player with the most votes receives an additional action point for that round. The rounds play out over a determinate period of time, which is adjustable. We're playing with that right now. And, because we have some very creative people, we thought it'd be interesting to add a little bit more juice to this and place the board universe on a pixel grid. So each square here, actually, I can demonstrate this now, is a pixel grid with a full color picker, and you can draw whatever you want. I'm just going to squiggle here a little bit to demonstrate. I will confirm, and that will get gossiped out to all the other players. You can see some other folks are making some interesting drawing here. We should go ahead and get this game kicked off right now. I might just need to refresh it. I'm going to give this a quick one. So I noticed while I was giving this little introduction to Tharsis that there was a player next to me that was looking a little bit suspicious, and I don't have that many action points right now. So I think my next step here is I want to talk to some of my fellow Tharsis players and see if we can't get a little bit of an alliance going. So I'll see if Sagram Savlok here wants to pass me some action points, and maybe I can take out Pinzod here. Let's message him real quick. So this is the talk DMs built directly into the game. I'll see what Sagram has to say about this. In the meantime, maybe I can hedge my bet here a little bit and try and get Handfell to give me some action points here too. I'll be more direct with Handfell. So you can see, actually, Sagram just moved here, and I do have a message. We have. Oh, good. Okay, he's in. Let's see. I'll just see how much I can get out of Sagram. I bet I can extract maybe like 3 or 4 action points from him. The other mechanic that we support here, in addition to the moving, the shooting, and the drawing, and the trading of action points, is upgrading cannon range. So I've now, I just noticed actually I have 12 action points, so that means I got both Handfell and Sagram to give me some sweet. Thank you. I'm pretty packed at this point, and I play a little bit dirty in these games. Sarliv, he's a great guy. He's done a lot for all of us, but he's looking like a juicy target here. So I think what I might do is move a little bit closer to Sarliv and take him out. So I'm gonna get up in his face here. And maybe I'll give him a little bit of a warning. See if we can convince him that I'm not actually a threat. One thing that you've noticed by now probably is that there is a cooldown timer for turns. This is a little bit of a preventive measure just because we're experimenting with solid state subscriptions like some other teams, and we wanted to make sure that as we were testing some of this new technology, we weren't overloading the single node that we're using. So Sarlev is unsuspecting, the kind guy that he is. So let's murk him. I'm gonna use 3 points, and I'm just gonna kill him. He's dead. We can see up here. I shot Sarlev Sarsen for 3 damage, and I killed him. He really stood no chance here. I think the one final thing that I'll do is, just for good measure, since I did promise the other players, is I'll come up here and I'll try and take out Pinzod too. That is going to put me into cooldown, so hopefully I don't expose myself here to counterattack, but I feel like Pinzod is maybe a little bit busy. So let me move, and we'll try and get one more kill in before we wrap up the demo. Okay. So we've moved. I'm going to prepare my shot here. So once the cooldown is done, I will be able to make my move. I can see Sagram is actually taking some damage already too. So if I survive this, then we might have to check back in with him and see if we can't get the alliance reformed. So I am going to confirm that. And hopefully we will have a dead Pinzod, and we do. I'm well on my way to victory now, so I think I'll pause the demo here. This gives you a good sense of some of the basic mechanics here. Tharsis is sort of an early alpha release at this point. We've done a few private play tests with folks on the network and anticipate that we'll open this up to more people in the coming weeks. So keep a lookout for this in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We'll have some additional sort of like teaser material around this. I hope the other thing that you've noticed actually with some of these images is that, like this one in particular, Slayer, I'm a big fan. I think Sagram probably drew that. I know he's a little bit of a metalhead. Little Wolfer is in here as well. He could have been the person that put this one here. I'm not that good of a pixel art artist actually, and I'm betting that my coworkers aren't either. So I'm a little bit suspicious of that. I feel like maybe someone has some plugins, some extensions, some little hacks that they're using to do things that are not in the base game. This is absolutely one of the things that we hope to see with this game. Part of our thesis around Urbit as a system and the kinds of systems that we want to build as Vaporware, again, calling back to the sort of framing of the opportunity, is demonstrating the potential for composability and for releasing sort of early versions of software that can be extended and remixed and then hopefully remonetized by those developers as well. So as folks get their hands on this, we hope that you play around with some of the APIs. We've tried to document things well and push the limits of what this interface can do. We'll have some initial ideas as well, and we're thinking about ways of sort of incentivizing that kind of behavior too. So this was a quick look at Mask and an early look at Tharsis. Having seen this, if you're interested in doing some early play tests with us as we're finishing this up, feel free to reach out to anyone that was in this game on the network. Shoot us a message, and we'll be happy to sort of take down your name and try and get you invited to one of the early games. So I will pop back over now and see if we have any questions that I can answer. Not seeing anything obvious in chat. Sam, let me know if I'm missing something here. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope this was interesting. I hope we got you excited for Tharsis and for Mask. If you have any questions about the work that we're doing, any thoughts on sort of the framing of the work that we're doing, want to chat about Vaporware and NFTs, feel free to come check us out. Ligbell Vaporware is our public group. That is where we have sort of release notes about our software and more information about the work that we're doing. Thanks.